Hi, I'm Abbi from Hexhamtv and I'm with
Joe Morris, the Member of Parliament for the Hexham constituency.
How are small independent businesses being supported?
I think that the government's done some quite important things on late payments, and it's done some quite important things to give small business some more administrative support. But one of the things that I'm frustrated with is lack of support coming from government for hospitality businesses in particular. I know how important hospitality is to young people getting their first job, how important it is to the economy of the entire community in this constituency, and also to supporting communities growing their economies locally. So I think government could do a lot more to support small businesses, and particularly small hospitality businesses. They're struggling with their energy costs. I know there's rising employment costs, and those are challenges that go back 10, 15 years that haven't been sufficiently grappled with. But it's really important that whenever the new Prime Minister comes in, that we're able to really address the challenges that those small hospitality businesses are facing, because they're the businesses that we all interact with every day. They're the businesses that really define our communities to ourselves, and I'll be really keen to see government bring forward additional support for them.
How will the government make employment easier for the inexperienced youth?
So there's a really important national conversation going on about youth unemployment at the moment and about access to opportunity. And young people, whether they're leaving school, leaving college, leaving university, all deserve a career that matches their ambition, matches their aspiration, matches their talent. And again, I think it's really vital that we make sure that they've got access to those jobs where they can. And in this area, having gone to school here myself, I think the tragedy of this area has always been that many young people feel the need to move away, and it rips the heart out of some of our communities. It means that there is a kind of lost generation sometimes in our area that feel they have to leave. I want to see it made easier for young people to get access to work, and there's a lot of discussions being thrown around internally in our party's leadership contest at the moment that are all good and that all have merit and all need to be further challenged and worked out. So I'm very keen to see those young people supported into work, but it's down to politicians to make sure that there is not just the support available, but that we work to create the jobs that are long lasting, that can support communities for decades and can kind of provide a career that people can not just live on, but can build a life, build a career and build a family on as well.
How will the government make transport more accessible for rural parts of the community?
So rural transport comes up whether I'm doing surgeries out in Allendale or up in Bellingham or out in Long Horsley. Access to a good bus route's really, really important to making sure that people have not just got access to employment, because it's how young people who perhaps don't drive have to get to work. It's also how people without a car or who have lost access to driving can access communities. So I know that there are already moves afoot from our North East Mayor Kim McGuinness to franchise the buses, bring them back into public ownership and make them more responsive to need in our communities. Something that I'll work with her on to support. I do think that our county council has been pretty behind the times on supporting the west of the county in good public transport links. They've not fought hard enough for good public transport in the west of Northumberland, but unfortunately that's just something that's defined the Conservative Party in our part of the world.
Will you be able to introduce green zones in Hexham to help reduce the impact of carbon emissions?
So we're sat here, I think, the week where the national emergency briefing was shown at the Abbi, and the environment's something that's really important to people, whether it's in Hexham town itself or in the communities around Hexham or in the other towns in the Tyne Valley. We all care about the amazing natural landscape that we have, we all care about the planet, and we all care about handing it on to the next generation in as best a state as we possibly can. I think it's important that politicians like me support local initiatives for green zones or for additional measures to protect our environment. But this is a global crisis. This is something that has to be solved by countries and by international bodies just as much as it can be solved by local communities. So we need to celebrate community action where it's taking place, support it where it's taking place. But what we can't do is assume that that is a replacement for bolder government action on the climate. Bolder international action on the climate. It's why we need to make sure that we move away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible and move towards a renewable energy system that actually incentivises environmental activity and incentivises making sure that we have a planet that's livable for everyone.
There's a lack of affordable houses. Are you going to introduce any affordable house or apartment options?
Look, I'd love to see more affordable housing, particularly for young people. I think there is a chronic shortage of it in this area. What we need to do is make sure that sites like the Hexham Middle School development that are being built need to be built with an eye on not just affordable but also social rent, social affordability as well, because people who are in our community but who perhaps have to leave our community to get into a house they need, to get into a house or a flat they need, simply have to leave the community they're in at the moment. So I think again, there's not been enough action, there's not been enough courage from previous politicians in this part of the world, from the current council, in an ambitious plan to make sure that we have the housing that we need. What we should be doing is making sure that housing is responsive to local need. It needs to not just be kind of plonk in estates for the sake of it. It needs to be, making sure that we're putting affordable, good quality homes where local people need them, where there's demand for them, rather than just kind of building for the sake of it. But I think access to good quality, affordable housing is one of the major challenges in this area, in this community. It's one that I'm in my mid-30s. It's one that I see the generation that I grew up with. A lot of them had to leave the area in order to get on the housing ladder, in order to access the career they needed to, and it's unfortunately led to a lot of those people who perhaps wanted to stay in the area having to leave it.
What is the government doing to reduce the burden of student debts?
So I think the short answer is the government needs to do a lot more for young people. I was the last year to go to university before fees went up. So I remember vividly the 2010 election when the Lib Dems ran on that student fee promise and then reneged on it straight away when they went into government. And Nick Clegg kind of, I think, is the reason that a lot of people of my generation have an innate distrust of politicians. Student debt is essentially young people pay a higher marginal rate of tax due to policy decisions made largely by the Conservatives when they were in government. And it's something that I'm really, really conscious that the next Prime Minister, the next government need to do much more on, because the next generation need to be able to have confidence that they will be able to do well, be able to work hard, be able to have the career they deserve and not be kind of punished for their aspiration.
How are you supporting the farming community?
So I have spent a lot of time with the farming community since I was elected. I was within government before I resigned as Parliamentary Private Secretary. I actually threatened to resign over the issue of inheritance tax. If there hadn't been a concession, I was prepared to resign at that point. I felt it was the best thing to do to kind of remain in the tent, to be able to get into the rooms I needed to be in, to voice the concerns I had about the impact of farming inheritance tax. And I couldn't have done it without working with local farmers, without making sure that they had the opportunity to put their case directly to Treasury ministers in this constituency. Because I don't want to just bring politicians up here for photo ops. I want to make sure that when I bring politicians up here, when I bring ministers up here and senior members of my party up here, they're not just taking a picture and then sort of getting the next train home. They are having needed, meaningful conversations with the communities that I represent. And I know that, to be honest, I think that conversation that the local farming community had with the Treasury Minister who came up was fundamental in changing positions, in my opinion. And I think there's a lot more we can do to support farmers. We need to make sure that government buys more British produce. That's not just something that's good for farmers, that's actually good for our environment as well. Every field that is cut out of the Amazon, every field that goes out of production in the UK is something that we end up importing from elsewhere. That drives transport emissions. That means that we're buying food from a nation that may not have the same environmental or worker protections that we have here. And so we need to be really ambitious in supporting our farming community. And I think having returned to the backbenches, one of the reasons I did so was to be more of a kind of, be able to voice these concerns more freely. I did also in recent weeks bring up one of the contenders to be the next Prime Minister, Wes Streeting, up to the constituency to meet with local farmers, to hear directly from them their concerns, the challenges they face, some of the breaches of trust that they've had. And I think no government can do without engaging with farmers properly. And as long as I'm the MP here, I'm going to make sure that farmers get a fair hearing from not just myself, but from senior figures in my party as well.
How are young people, including farmers, able to afford their lifestyle of high costs of living?
So supporting young people having the opportunities they need to have is absolutely vital. It's not just about supporting lifestyle, it's about supporting careers, it's about supporting people getting the experience they need to do to get on in life, and supporting aspiration. I think, in terms of the cost of living shocks that we've seen from the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, we've seen massive global effects of that, and the government needs to do as much as it can to shield people. I do think that on things like heating oil, where the government did step in, did provide support to communities who rely on heating oil, who are our most rural communities, that was a really vital step forward in taking off some of the cost of living pressures. But much more needs to be done, and I think in our part of the world, we need to think about West Northumberland. We need to think about the issues that we've had, where again we have derelict sites in this part of the constituency, and we have a county council who are, I think Northumberland Conservatives almost specialise in finding these derelict sites, finding these areas and just leaving them to rot, leaving the communities around them to suffer. And it's incumbent on the Conservative councillors from this part of the constituency to do more, to be vocal, to actually stand up for their constituents and their residents for once, rather than doing what they currently do, which is just whack up council tax for this part of the constituency and then invest it elsewhere in the county.
Are youth community centres going to open in rural villages where there's not as much to do for young people?
I'd love to see more things to do for young people. I think unfortunately the library service, which is run by the county council at the moment, is looking at reducing opening hours for some of the most rural libraries in this constituency, and I think that's a pretty naked attack from the Conservative Council on our constituency, on the services that people of all generations rely on. I think opening up more opportunities to young people, whether they're in our most rural communities or whether they're in the more urban parts of the constituency that I'm lucky to represent, needs to be a priority for every politician. And as much as I disagree with people across politics, I'm committed to working with them where I can to improve everyone's chances and everyone's lives. And I think that reduction in library opening hours is a real assault on our part of Northumberland.
Except for England, who are you supporting in the World Cup?
Well, I got the Netherlands in a sweepstake recently, so I think I'll be supporting the Netherlands. But look, I love the World Cup. I watched the opening game last night. It probably wasn't the best game we've ever seen. I think 3 red cards always make it a bit odd. But I'll be supporting England all the way, and if not, then I hope that the Netherlands do well.
You've mentioned in your answers about a next Prime Minister. Who do you think that would be?
So I resigned from government and I called on Keir to resign the Monday after the local elections. I think there needs to be a change. I think for the sake of the country, there needs to be a change. I think Keir has unfortunately lost the confidence of many of his parliamentary party. He's lost the confidence of the public. And I think a change is not just necessary, it's fundamentally important to beating reform at the ballot box, because reform are, I think, a very dangerous proposition for everyone in this constituency, whatever your politics. There's a lot of talent in the Labour Party. Andy Burnham, I think, is one of the best communicators the party has. I'm going to be hoping that he wins in Makerfield, and I think everyone in the party, whatever their views on who the next Prime Minister should be, wants to see Andy win that by-election. Wes Streeting was my boss when I was at the Department for Health. I work closely with Wes. I've seen Wes operate up close. I would back Wes if there was a contest. And I think that it's really important that we have a contest that enhances our top team, that really puts people like Wes and Andy on the map. It allows them to put forward their policies that they've both, because Wes has been Secretary of State for Health, he's been unable to talk about the economy, unable to talk about other issues, and Andy, who's been focused on running Manchester really well, they both need to be able to set out their stall and set out the important parts of what they do, how they change, how they do things differently. I think those are 2 really important, really talented people. But ultimately, I didn't call on Keir to go with anything other than an extremely heavy heart. I think Keir should not contest. If there is a challenge, I think the best thing for Keir to do would be to accept that it's over, and accept that he should no longer lead the Labour Party. I appreciate that's a difficult thing, but I think the change is now necessary. I think it's inevitable, and while I'll be backing Wes, I think fundamentally people like Andy would be a massive improvement as well. So whoever wins that contest is going to have my full support.
Thank you.